Thank you for having me. So yeah, I'm Pete. I run an information security company here in Wellington. We do a mixture of like pen testing, audit work, maturity reviews, and a whole bunch of other things along those lines. Working alongside government and right through to kind of software dev companies and everything in between. Yeah, cool. So this talk kind of came about a little bit because of Jim Rush, who's sitting in the front row here, who used to work with me, and he quite regularly would go and tell people about, like, you know, if you give the same app to 5 different people, you're going to get 5 different outcomes. That no 2 testers are the same, that you're never going to get the same things every time. There's probably a baseline of stuff that you will, but not always. And so I guess I'm talking about this from a position of security testing today, but I think there's also quite a lot of similarities with other areas. So whether that's development, if you give the same requirements to 5 different people, you're probably going to get 5 slightly different outcomes from there. Design, like arts, medicine, a whole lot of different industries are all going to, if you give requirements to people, you're going to get different outcomes. For some context though, so penetration testing is security testing we do so that we can get confidence in the security of applications that we've developed or systems that we've developed. And I think one of the things we often find is, like as a pen tester, when we go and do some work with an organisation, if we go and ask for their last year's pen test report, we might often find a whole bunch of issues that haven't been seen before. And if we ask for the past 5 years ones, we're probably going to get 5 wildly different results. Sometimes that's because they've gone and added a whole bunch of new features and functionality to that app. Sometimes it's just because different people have been looking at it each year. And so this is a bit of a dig in as to why that might be the case, what some of those reasons are, and how you can also kind of mitigate some of that as well. Rockin'. So we'll cover sort of the people factor, how scoping can change things, in the case of security, how it's a bit of a moving target, methodologies and tooling, how we just have real constraints as well, and some takeaways that we can bring. Cool. So I think one of the first key parts of this is just the people factor. Who's in your team is really important, and who a tester is really important. Everyone has different backgrounds, everyone has different skill sets, everyone has different things that influence what they do. People think in different ways, people act in different ways. And so when you're engaging a company to do some testing, in theory you're engaging that whole company and not just one person. Otherwise you'd probably just go and get that contractor on staff for you. And sometimes you might only have one person actually doing that testing, but you know, then you go through like a QA process, or other people on the team review it or provide input, or you know, someone in the team wanders behind someone as they see someone working on something and they go, oh, have you thought about trying this? Have you had a look at this? In our office, people might just go and shout out and go, I don't know, is anyone familiar in this technology, or want to have a look at this as well? So we've got 2 hackers here, Steve and Shelley, both our fictional pen testers. And who would do the better pen test? Who knows? I mean, Shelley's wearing a sweet hoodie, which is pretty hacker, so maybe they're going to do a real good job. Steve looks like a bit of a nerd, but you know, maybe he's just a sweet hacker who really loves suits. And we've got a bunch of reasons why their backgrounds and things may affect what they do. So we have a whole number of testers within our team, and they've all got different backgrounds. People come from different places, they're familiar with different things, they've done different things in their past lives. Some testers will come from a development background. I was an electrical engineer. I know guys who were welders before they became pen testers, who have been in music, who have been in a whole bunch of different industries. And so those different things that you've done in a past life are going to affect the way that you think about things, the bits of your brain that you use, the context that you bring along to a test as well. People have different training that they've done. So within the security space, there's hundreds of different qualifications that you can do. Some of the kind of popular ones are things like OSCP, or CEH is another one that people do. Whether it's good or not is a different question. And so that training as well is going to have some form of effect on what you do. Some people have a university background before they get into security and get into testing. Some people just come at it straight from high school. Some people come at it straight from work. Some people have done bug bounties and then found their way into kind of a professional testing career. And so there's all these different backgrounds that can kind of lead to different outcomes and different things that you're going to find. We've got different ways that people think as well. So whether you're kind of left brain focused or right brain focused. Where is my mouse? Cool. Whether you get have a more creative view or a more logical view of how you look for things is all going to make an effect on what you actually find. If you've got a longer or shorter experience as well. So if you're fresh into the industry and this is your first test that you've done, you're probably not going to find the same things as someone who's been around for 15 years and been testing similar technologies for a long period. There's always sometimes a bit of another part to that as well, of if you've been testing for a long time and you've kind of got a bit blasé about the whole thing, you might miss things. There was an example where we had a junior tester, fairly fresh, maybe 6 or 12 months in, and because he was fairly fresh, he used to go down the list every time he did a test. And so he found an issue in an app that had been fairly well tested. I think it had gone through, it had been getting tested every year for the last 5 years or something. And he found an issue with the SSO implementation of it, where it wasn't doing a check on the nonce, I think. And that essentially meant that you could go and bypass the authorization checks to get into this thing. So as long as you had any account, you could essentially have any privileged account, you could make yourself an admin and you're all good. Other testers in the team hadn't seen that because, they were looking at things from a different perspective. Technically, they knew that attack existed, but why would anyone ever do that? That's a ridiculous thing that just doesn't actually happen. But this guy was just going down the methodology and going, nah, this is on my list of things to check. He checked it, they hadn't implemented it properly, and he found a sweet way into this app. That then paired with another person in the team who was then able to go and do some more kind of complicated things in there and ended up with RCA in the app. So sometimes a set of fresh eyes can give you things that someone that's more experienced is just going to miss because it's no longer interesting or it's no longer a thing that they necessarily go down the lines of. I've mentioned bug bounties in there as well. So bug bounties are a way where organizations can go out to the public and go, here's the scope of things that we're happy for you to test. Can you find bugs in our systems or services? And so there's people that go around and pretty much just make a living off just doing bug bounties. And the kind of efficient ways to do that is you have a whole bunch of enumeration that you would do on a whole bunch of apps, you find things about it, and then often you have a bit of a niche that you'll look into. So it might be that you're particularly into timing attacks, or you're particularly into some kind of logic bugs or some specific types of auth bugs, or you're looking for certain subcomponents that they might have that that there's issues in, and then you can find vulnerabilities in those apps. Someone who's more familiar in that is probably going to find different things than someone who or who has a background in bug bounties. Is probably going to find different things than someone who's spent their entire life working in a consultancy where scopes aren't as narrow, where the testing space is probably a bit wider, where there haven't been as many eyes over those applications as well. And so there's kind of benefits on both sides. You can find some really, people who are into bug bounties will find some really cool niche bugs. They'll also often do some really good enumeration, etc. But there might be other areas that they're not quite as strong in. And in the same way of a pen tester who's just been working on kind of corporate apps within a consultancy for years might not find the same kinds of bugs and might not find the same depth of bugs as someone who has that bug bounty experience. Yeah, cool. So we've talked a bit about the prior experience already. There could be a whole bunch of different things. Like Steve could have worked in healthcare in the past, and so he's really familiar with the kind of logic behind healthcare apps and the important bits of those and where they go. Shelley could be straight out of uni. Steve could spend his spare time doing bug bounties. Shelley might have the OSCP. Steve loves web apps. Shelley loves network testing. Steve had a previous life working in as a mechanic. Shelley's never had any prior work experience. Steve's never actually had any CVEs against his name, but Shelley's got a whole number of vulnerabilities that they've disclosed publicly. So there's a whole bunch of different reasons that you can, and different backgrounds that are then going to actually affect what you're looking at, how you look at it as well. We talk a little bit about scoping later on, but the way that people allocate time when they're testing as well is a really kind of important thing as to how they get outcomes as well. If you've only got a discrete amount of time to do a test, The way that you spend that time is going to be really important as to kind of what outcomes you get. So if you spend a whole bunch of time in enumeration at the start and no time actually going kind of digging into different issues, then you're going to find a different set of things than if you just do some really quick enumeration and then try and dig into a few areas that that smell a bit off. You're going to find different things if you've got 1 day or 3 days or 5 days or 20 days on an application. People have different risk appetites and different things that they're considerate of. If you found a whole bunch of issues in a certain area before, that you've got a certain bug class that you're really interested in, if you're kind of that auth guy who's just really passionate about auth, because some people are, then you're probably going to go and immediately target that area. And depending on who's had a look at it before or how adept the devs were who'd gone and created that, you're going to find different things that come out of there. There's a whole bunch of different tooling available as well. And some people lean really heavily on tooling, I guess especially, kind of more often on the more junior side of things, you might lean more towards the tooling and a bit less on initiative or intuition. And so that's going to get you some different outcomes than if you're kind of going by, I don't know, a guided code review where you're actually having a look through the code or where you're doing things from a more first principles basis. Yeah. Cool. Bit of a naff example, but if you were to give a 5 different artists a thing of going paint this scene, they're going to go and hit that in 5 different ways. You know, some people might start with the background first, some people might start with the foreground, some people might do it with paint, some people might do it with coloured pencils, some people might finger paint it, some people might use some very nice brushes. So you're going to end up with a whole bunch of different results there just based on how you do it. If you start layering more constraints on them as to how they do it, then you're more likely going to get some more consistency, but are you going to get the same variety or the same things that actually, the same kind of awesome art at the end that you might not if you give them more freedom from the outset? So yeah, in the end of the day, we all get to the same kind of place, but there's a different path to get there. And yeah, this isn't just in security testing and kind of functional QA testing. The exact same things apply, right? If you give, depending on how things are scoped and what people are actually doing and what their test plans are that they're working to or not working to, you're going to find a whole bunch of different things, depending on who it is that's looking at it, what their background is, what they've got experience on before. If you've got a whole bunch of experience in banking and you're testing a banking app, you're going to find different things probably than the person who has been working in healthcare and they're now working on a banking app. Financial auditing, it's a similar vibe of, you know, they technically work to frameworks, but there's still the chance of actually finding different things based on your different sets of knowledge and your different experience. If you've been in space for a longer time, you're going to be more adept at some of the more common issues that occur, and you're going to be more likely to poke some of those out within the kind of smaller time frame than maybe someone who's more fresh to it. And in the scheme of things, like pen testing is pretty fresh. Like apparently it's been around for about 60 years in various forms. But like in New Zealand, the first pen testing company was formed in 2005. So that's like real short, 20 years. Whereas some of these other industries like financial auditing have been around for a long time. So there's been a lot more time to kind of put rigor and like better methodologies around to kind of settle on what normal is and what good looks like. And I think that's one of those things that like, as technology evolves, there are going to be some kind of probably more appropriate guardrails that you put around things or methodologies, but there's always going to be a level of, you need a little bit of art and a little bit of science. That nothing is ever cookie cutter, so you can't just put one set of rules around it. Rockin'. And so to kind of follow on from that, there are a bunch of frameworks within the security space. So OWASP WSTG, so the Web Security Testing Guidelines, the Penetration Testing Execution Standard, or the NIST guidelines. So there's a whole bunch of kind of ways that you can scope things and ways that you can approach testing in kind of formal manners. Do most of the people I know actually follow those? Nah, because it's a level of formality, again, that we're fairly fresh in the space in New Zealand, in the scheme of things, and sometimes this puts constraints around testing that you don't want put in place. I guess AI tooling is becoming the new cool thing, and it wouldn't be a talk here without talking about AI, right? So, and that's going to find testing, or that's going to find issues kind of faster than you'd normally find them. But there's still a level of like false positives that you've got to be able to check. You've got to know the technologies you're looking at. You've got to know how to actually look at it with a critical eye. And it's more likely that, through tooling and AI kind of guided things that you're going to find those more kind of known patterns, known issues, known vulnerabilities, but you're going to find more novel things through manual testing and find more logic bugs. Scoping is really important. So I've been in scoping meetings that have gone 5 minutes and scoping meetings that have gone like an hour. And the outcome of those is can be wildly different because suddenly you've got more or less context as to what you're going to have a look at. Some people can provide source code, some people can provide design diagrams, some people just go, we want you to look at this thing, here's a URL, go. Are we going to take any constraints off? Nah. You just get to look at it as if you're someone on the public and go for gold. And so there's a bunch of kind of questions that you can ask in that space that are going to give you more or less detail. But one of the kind of key parts here is actually just knowing what the outcome is that you're looking after. So is the outcome that you're after, we want to be really secure and we want to be good citizens on the web and protect our clients or data? Or is the outcome we need to be able to use PCI, or we need to be PCI compliant so that we can go and take credit card payments? Because in which case you've got to have two different things there and two different amounts of money you're probably willing to spend on the testing and different focuses when you're doing that testing as well. Some clients want things tested in different ways. So sometimes it might be kind of like white box or open box where you can go, hey, we're going to go and give you a copy of the source code. We're going to go and tell you exactly how this thing hangs together so that you can find more cool things so that we can be a safer, more secure app. And other people that go, no, we want this done kind of from a black box perspective where we don't want you to actually know anything that's happening in the background and we just want you to see what you can find. We've had some really interesting kind of cases of some of those where like clients have been like, nah, we're not willing to take away any security controls. We'd often take away something like a web application firewall when we're testing so that we can actually focus on the app more and we're not getting constant errors firing up because we've tried too many requests in a short period. We had one client that did that, so we had a tester who then just put down his foot and went, nah, I'm just going to go and troll you now. So he found some cool WAF bypasses, ended up finding some really cool bugs in it. And if they'd just gone and like bypassed the WAF in the first place, he would have actually been able to spend that effort probably getting a wider variety of things. And he might not have actually found those issues in the first place because he probably wouldn't have been nearly as pissed off. Cool. Next one's just around constraints. So there's always going to be constraints to everything we do. And this kind of goes across industries as well, whether it's functional, non-functional testing, security testing, whatever the case is. People who have limited time, people who have limited budgets. It needs to fit in a certain part of a software life cycle. We can only test in non-prod, we can only test in prod. We can use real data, we can't use real data. We're willing to tell you about certain things, or we're not willing to tell you about certain things. So yeah, time pressure is a big one here. And so, you're going to get a different outcome from a 3-day engagement versus a 5-day engagement versus a 20-day engagement. For one of them, you're going to find the really surface type bugs. For others, you're going to probably find some quite cool deeper things. You can actually get a chance to dig in there and really focus on some areas. In New Zealand, we're probably typically more a bit constrained when it comes to budgets. So we're just going to be kind of considerate of that as well. And that probably gives us some changes to some of the outcomes of our testing. And there's also some assumptions that happen in here kind of from like my side of it when we're scoping of, we just assume people don't want to spend money sometimes. We assume that they're going to be constrained about the amount of time they want to give something. And so you've actually just got to ask those questions and be willing to kind of go like, how much money would you like to spend on this? What things would you like a focus on? What things would you like looked at? And then that often kind of make sure that you're actually on the right page. Different apps are also going to lead to different things. So if you're having a look at payment apps, like the payment flows are going to be really important and integrity of that data is going to be really important. For government, like reputation is super important there. So again, kind of integrity is really important as well as confidentiality. You might have a time-sensitive app, so like an election type app or a nominations type app where something's actually only open for one day of the year. Or what is it, like the doc, national walks kind of thing, that where it goes up for one day, it gets super heavy traffic, and then no one cares about it again for the rest of the year. And so in those cases, like availability is super important, and you kind of change your focus as to what you'd test on. But if you don't know about that up front, you're less likely going to focus on those things, and then there's more likely going to be an issue down the track. Security is a moving target. So yeah, just because something didn't exist yesterday, it might exist today. There's some kind of quite popular examples here of things that have come up with critical vulnerabilities that, you know, these issues were still present in the application yesterday or within kind of your systems or services yesterday, but it was only that day that it was actually disclosed and released publicly that everyone knew about it. So Log4Shell was about 5 years ago. It happened just before Christmas. It really sucked because it meant that it kind of killed a whole bunch of DevOps engineers' time and operations engineers' time over Christmas. And that was found, so it was in a Java library, and it's found through a whole bunch of apps and environments. And so there's a whole bunch of patching that had to happen just before Christmas. But that issue existed before. And so just because we don't know about something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. There's always a level of unknown. Like Log4Shell has existed for years. The issues with like Reactor Shell exist for quite a while as well. There've been lots of eyes over these services, and lots of pen tests probably done where these were components of, but because you didn't have necessarily the focus to look at that one thing, you didn't find it. The XZUtils backdoor was an issue with like SSH, and that was found by a guy who was, I think, working for Microsoft on the open source community, and it was like he was doing benchmarking, and it was a slight deviation in the timing that it took. And so it was a really like nuanced thing, right? And like, you know, if something took slightly longer, would you think that it was any issue? And would you actually dig into it? Most people wouldn't. But this guy, that was his background. He was like super into this, and he goes, no, but this always takes this amount of time. There must be something wrong. And so he found that issue. Like the Reactor Shell thing, that was actually a Kiwi bloke, Lockie. And again, that was just like, you know, he'd had a couple of engagements or whatever where he was working on things that had React in it. He got it down a bit of a road path, and then he found this issue, and it went and affected a whole bunch of applications all over the internet. Cool. So what can we actually do? So I think defining scopes collaboratively is really important. Making sure we're asking the right questions. Making sure we actually kind of know what we want and what outcomes we want. Talking about methodologies up front as well. So again, this is kind of like not just in security, but in other areas as well. If you actually talk about like, are there frameworks that you particularly care about? Are there ones that you definitely want to be followed? Or do you want that slightly more artistic way, and having a look at kind of some more novel areas as well? Is this purely a compliance exercise, or is it actually you're wanting to kind of be better and do good? Being explicit about priorities. Are there certain areas that you care about? So do you particularly care about the availability of your application, or do you care about the confidentiality more? Do you really care about that auth flow? What are the areas that you care most about? Where would you like the most effort placed? Yeah, treating reports as conversations. So like, you know, sometimes we might go and say something is based on our knowledge when we're doing testing. Something might just be considered a low severity, or in the other way, it might be considered a high. For different clients, we can have the same finding might lead to different severities. An example recently of that is we were doing some testing, and there'd been multiple other people do that testing as well. And someone had just done like an IP whitelisting, so it wasn't effective. So essentially it meant that other people on the internet could access something that shouldn't have been accessed. And they'd looked at it and they'd just gone, yeah, that's fine because there's other controls in place and it's actually all good. When we'd had a look at it, then we had some conversations with the client, and they went, actually, no, that's horrific. We weren't actually aware that that had been raised previously. That's really important for us that that's not in place. And so just depending on who the client is, depending on their background, depending on what other controls are in place, can sometimes affect the severity of things. And so just having that conversation about things and going, actually, to us, that's way more important, or to us, that's way less important as well. Yeah, retesting things and not just fixing it and being like, YOLO, this will be sweet. Sometimes when you fix things, you actually introduce more issues, and that can be real bad. So just because you've had a test done, you've now got to fix all those issues. It's great. We've got to mark that all off in our risk register. We're happy days. Actually, by fixing those things, you might have introduced a whole bunch of other issues. And so getting someone to have a look at that again can be really important. And then layering controls. So things like, approaching things from different ways by having like code analysis in your pipeline, having pen tests done regularly, maybe having a bug bounty program, and then having all the other good security controls in place as well. So within your applications, making sure you know what software components you have, that you're patching things, that you're keeping things up to date, that you've got logging in place to know when something's gone wrong. You might have a web application firewall in front of it as well, but making sure that those all those controls are in place so that you're not just relying on one thing, because no one pen test finds everything. This is just a dude that's on the like Google bug bounty list, but like, Google, lots of people use Google products. I think this guy's found a whole bunch of issues in Chrome, and he's like the top of their bug bounty list at the moment. He's finding novel things within Chrome. That's a really known platform, and so like nothing is really safe, eh? That leaves a little bit as like, I'm fine, everything's fine, don't worry. But we'll layer controls, it'll be all good. But yes, thank you very much.